Let me give you a tour of the classes that are involved with the conversion to SQL. In front of you is the standard repo. You have all these AEFs that can be imported into the same repo, and they will result in building SQL Master, which is probably the best sample application you have. There are two. The SOVO sample, which will show you running DBF and running SQL. SQL Master itself, which is a tool to generate and add and edit a SQL database, and a couple of other small samples that do bits and pieces, which we'll talk about later. Let's just go through the other libraries. Firstly, I have the bbrowser source code, which is only included if you own the source code yourself, and the reason I include it is so that we can debug into bbrowser if we have to. Secondly, there's my replacement for the DB server classes in VO. These are optimized and will probably run 2 to 3 times faster than the standard classes. There is an XML parsing DLL, which you may not need. There is the source code to VO to ADO. Again, I include this in my project so that I can debug into them if I get strange problems that I can't see in my own code. I have a small library of images and sounds, a menu class that is really only used in my own window classes, base functions and classes that are used everywhere. The important one to point out here, and we'll talk about it later, is the global object class. All my GUI classes rely on the existence of this because it carries information such as connection information, startup information, Active Directory information, and other information used to compile and construct error messages. Willie Moore's write SLE. My override of all the VO GUI classes, and again there is a lot of automated screen handling in here that you may not be interested in, but they are used in my GUI windows, and for that reason they need to be there. My service client, which is a C# DLL, we'll talk more about that later on. Fab's zipping classes, which I'm hoping to get rid of fairly soon. And these are my base window classes, where they involve B browsers in particular. My base server classes, GUIs to go with your server classes, and we'll go through some of these in a short while. A base report class which you probably don't need, the actual SOVO sample, which I'll have a separate video running of, and SQL Master, which again will have its own video to explain how to use it. So effectively, to set yourself up, you need to have all these classes in your system. One system is important. Let me expand it and show you some of the classes in here. The function library includes all the debug output. Now, debug output is your friend. You'll see the source code here ultimately ends up in a debout32, and with debug out view running, I'll just bring the window over to you. This is dbg view.exe, which is available from sysinternals, and the benefit of using this as a mechanism for debugging is so that you can get runtime messages, particularly out of loops or in screen handling or event handling code, where you can't have a pop-up dialog interrupting the process. Many things can't be debugged inside the VO's IDE debugger, and this is one simple way to watch what's going on. You will see that as we execute a SQL application, that messages pop into here. For example, let me start one that I have already converted to SQL. As I start the application, you will notice that in the dbg view window, I'm getting to see a lot of messages that's coming through and all the SQL that's generated. So if I have problems with the SQL statements not working, I'll be able to see them in the dbg view. The overhead is very small. Another thing that's happening simultaneously, that's happening from my classes, is that it's generating a lot of log files. I'll just take you to that location in the system. It's in the user data area, data roaming, the name of the application. Where is it? Taskmaster, SQL logs, and you'll see that it's creating logs which are time-based, and I can open up any one of these logs and I'll be able to see the SQL that's generating. Now if I have a problem with the SQL, I can cut and paste it and put that SQL into SQL Server Management Studio or SQL Master and execute it and debug the statements. I can also see a time-based statement of what's happening to the tables, such as update statements, creating new classes, and starting new tables, so I can see all the conditions, all the where clauses and order by clauses that are involved. So basically I have a lot of information to help me run and execute the programs at runtime. Let's close this application. So this function library is very important. It also has a lot of string handling and a lot of support for SQL in terms of such things as cleaning up strings, removing unnecessary commas, spaces and underscores. This is the most important class that you will need to know about even if you don't use it in your own application. Effectively, it's a global object that acts like a public, in that it has a whole range of exports which are available application-wide, and a range of methods which are also available application-wide. We'll come back to this later on. There's some ancillary classes here that will help, such as the application class, which has such things as pre-encoded before dispatch methods for you to use, and auxiliary classes like a registry class, which is keyed for HCU local or HKey local machine, and some other supports such as my own field spec class, which puts in a lot of SQL support. But we'll come back to that later on when we get a chance. The next video will explain mainly what's happening inside the SQL specifics for the SQL classes.